every token that you add, because of the context window, and context rot, right? What we call context rot. That means like every new thing that you put in the context degrades the model performance. So whenever we come up with a new tool, we have to make sure that there is no regression. So there's two parts here. One, making sure that you have access to real data, because these agents will have to interact with real data at the end, which is a new thing, comparing to the initial LLMs, where it was just input and output, but also how to make sure that everything is still working and it's not just data that's changing. So coming back to the cost, we spent in some of those runs like $50 just in the evaluation part of it, which is mad if you think. But it's the best way we can find. I'm not saying it's the best long term, but it's the best available right now, which is rerunning as much as you can, trying to have a very close feedback loop between what is happening in the real world and what is happening in your sandbox scenario, and making sure that every new addition is actually making stuff better. We do some automatic evaluation on the trajectory using a LLM as a judge, but we have to keep it cheap, so it's not a very fancy or robust evaluation. It's just to make sure that the client, the user experience is not being degraded. But most of the evaluation runs offline, and recently we are working on adding a CI integration. So the idea is every time you change a prompt, every time you change a tool description, even, we run those tests, the scenarios, to make sure that we're not breaking stuff. Because different from traditional ML, where the accuracy would be very stable, if you change something else, you might be changing something completely different. You might be changing tempo tools, and that hurt logs for some reason because the context window is the same, right? We defer of using LLMs as a judge as much as we can. So if we are able to check with regex, with comparing it with real data, any other way to compare that data, we will use it. But one thing we learn is that whenever you're asking to LLM, if you have a Boolean criteria, so instead of asking like, is this good, is this bad, in a scale, usually we started with scale, like, and 0 to 10, is this good? And the LLMs are not good at that. So we usually say, for example, if you're evaluating a traces analysis workflow, you would ask like, is the bottleneck mentioned? Is the trace a link to traces present? I mean, all the criteria you want on that answer in a Boolean true false way. That way you can control a bit more that the LLM is not just inventing stuff, but you're not guaranteed for sure. But a way to make sure that your LLM as a judge is not drifting too much, and it's more or less related to the truth, is whenever you can compare that with human evaluation. So if you get human feedback, that's great, right? So comparing the human feedback with the LLM as a judge, it's a way to have at least a sense if your LLM as a judge is actually representing a human as a judge. The other alternative is having humans annotating data like we used to do with traditional ML, right? But the volume is so big that that's not as feasible anymore.